Hello, dear friends. My name is Hutch, and I make videos and put them on the internet. First of all, I just want to say that I was very, very nervous to relaunch this channel and focus on a new niche with politics, but the feedback and the response that I've been getting from you guys so far has been overwhelming. I thought it was going to be like a struggle for a little bit before sort of the older crowd that were more invested in gaming stuff stopped being so upset, but you guys seem to have taken it right away. And I just want to start this video off by saying thank you so much for that. It was very scary, but this is a lot of fun. I feel hungry about succeeding on YouTube again for the first time in probably a decade. And speaking of which, if you guys enjoyed today's video and you want to support it, if you like it, or if you subscribe, or if you hit the bell icon, all of these things really help with the algorithm. So yeah. In today's video, we are going to be covering Kamala building one of the most unique, if not the most unique coalition that I've ever seen in my 41 years of being an American.
And I do believe the closer we get to the election, the more that people reflect on what's at stake. Including the fact that the former president tried to undo the will of the people in a free and fair election on January 6th, led what was a violent attack on the United States Capitol. 140 uniformed law enforcement officers were attacked. Some died. I have seen from people who are former Trump supporters who are supporting me, that was a bridge too far. And back to the point about even the hurricanes that are the one that's about to hit Florida, what has already hit, I think people are exhausted. And they're exhausted with the lies, they're exhausted with the selfishness, they're exhausted with the attempt to divide us as Americans, and they're ready to turn the page and chart a new way forward. And I feel very optimistic about that.
Now, it is absolutely true that if you would have told me 10 years ago that Kamala would be teaming up with a Cheney to take down Donald Trump in an election, I think I would have probably, I think my head would have exploded. I just don't think I would have believed you. Dick Cheney, for me growing up, was such a galvanizing force in the sense that he was one of the worst people within the Bush administration who, during my extremely formative years in early college, had done a tremendous amount of damage and destruction to not only Iraq, but our international standing as well. Long story short, he was just an embarrassment. He was one of the things that I would point to when I was very young to legitimize the fact that I felt kind of ashamed to be an American. Liz Cheney's politics are, in my opinion, very bad, almost detestable. I have basically nothing in common with her on policy, but one thing we do share a common affinity for is liberal democracy and protecting our institutions and recognizing that Trump poses a great threat to all of these things. So if you've been following online discourse in the last couple of weeks, you will be well aware of the fact that Kamala touting Dick Cheney's endorsement, Kamala touting Liz Cheney's endorsement has been a source of controversy in left-wing spaces. A lot of people think that it's a shameful thing for her to accept the endorsement of a man like Dick Cheney, who was himself in many ways directly responsible for suffering on a magnitude that is difficult to comprehend in Iraq. We're talking about, at minimum, hundreds of thousands dead, at minimum 1 to 2 million people displaced. It was one of the worst foreign policy blunders in our nation's history. I don't think that we should forget that. I also think that we need to appreciate the moment that we're in right now. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that Donald Trump represents an existential threat to this country. If not immediately, then by virtue of the fact that he constantly tries to chip away and is sometimes successful at chipping away at our norms that keep our institutions strong. If nothing else, this sets the stage for someone to come down the line, and their job of upending democracy, if that was their goal, would be much easier because someone like Donald Trump came before him. Donald Trump tried to disenfranchise tens of millions, literally tens of millions of voters spread across a half a dozen or so swing states because he didn't like the results of the election. He tried to sue in courts up and down the country to toss those people's votes out. I live in California, a very safe blue state, but if I lived in a state like Arizona, if I lived in a state like Georgia, if I lived in a state like Pennsylvania, where Trump would have tried to have thrown my vote out, I would have been livid. I already am livid, but if I lived in one of those states, that would infuriate me. So the stakes of this election are very, very high as far as I'm concerned. And a lot of people don't agree with Kamala's decision to proudly tout these endorsements. One of those individuals is Kyle Kulinski. He gives his take here.
She's doing this big fawning event with Liz Cheney. First of all, her approval rating is abysmally low. Like, nobody actually likes her. And second of all, I don't know, have you seen an event like this be done with, say, Bernie Sanders, right? Or somebody who more represents the left worldview? No, because it's like they're taken for granted. She recently rejected a meeting with the uncommitted movement, right? So it's like run and hide from my base who are telling me stop arming and funding Israel as they carpet bomb innocent civilians. Run and hide from them and then go snuggle up to Liz Cheney. So this is the first time you're starting to see some of the same, you know, Hillary Clinton type mistakes being made. These are Hillary Clinton type mistakes. As that famous drill tweet goes, you don't, under any circumstances, gotta hand it to ISIS.
So I want to start by saying that I think Kyle Kulinski is a conflicted individual in that I have seen him give some unbelievably base takes. I have seen him, for example, take Brianna Joy Gray to task for not properly delegating enough responsibility to the Democratic Party in Minnesota for taking tiny majorities in the state legislature and the governorship and turning that into serious material gains for the state. But I've also heard him give his takes many a time that made me question his political instincts. So, for example, he supported the Force the Vote movement. If you're unfamiliar with what that is, there was a push early on in Biden's presidency from the left flank for members like the Squad, AOC, Ayanna Pressley, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, at the time Jamal Bowman. There was a push for them to withhold their vote for the House speakership in favor of Nancy Pelosi in order to try to acquire some leverage and then use that leverage to force a vote for Medicare for all on the House floor. This was a movement that was supported by people like Brianna Joy Gray and Jimmy Dore, and I think it was one of the most silly propositions that you could possibly suggest. Major healthcare reform in this country is something that has dogged basically every president in modern history, including Barack Obama, who wanted to go even further with the ACA. But you can go as far back as Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, H.W. Bush, Clinton, George W. Bush even. These are all presidents that wanted to do something big on healthcare, but were constrained by the Congress that they had at the time. There was no chance that something like Medicare for all could succeed. In 2021, when Joe Biden was inaugurated, we didn't have nearly the kind of majorities that we would need in Congress to pursue such a sweeping piece of federal legislation. Not that I even oppose the legislation, but it would have been expansive. It would have been sweeping. And in those cases, you need at least 60 firm yeses in the Senate because of the filibuster rule. So this is just one example of where I think Kyle Kulinski has very bad political instincts. And I think his take on the endorsement from Cheney is just wrong. The amount of people on the left that were planning on voting for Kamala but are now hesitating because someone like Liz Cheney is on the stump supporting her is minuscule. I don't know if you could find 3 people in the entire country that would say, well, I was going to support Kamala, but I don't know. I don't know about seeing her with Liz Cheney on a stage. On the contrary, the amount of disillusioned Republicans who are yearning to go back to the party of Reagan, to the party of actual fiscal conservatism, people that are very much turned off by Donald Trump's repeated attempts to undermine our democratic institutions. Those people do not exist in small numbers. That is a not so insignificant chunk of the Republican Party. You have to remember that we did have a series of Republican primaries, even though Donald Trump didn't show up to a single debate. And, you know, in fairness, if I was him, I don't know if I would either. But we were seeing states a month, 2 months after Nikki Haley dropped out of the race that were writing in Nikki Haley to the extent of 10, 20, 25%. Again, like a month or 2 after the election. And if we can convince even 5% of those Nikki Haley primary voters, 10%, 15%, and when the margins are this close during this election, that could be a difference maker. Political parties, when they're going for power, they're going to target what they view as gettable votes. And it's just a fact that the sort of very vocal online left portion of the left-wing coalition in this country, many of them have basically stated that there is no standard that Kamala could meet that would warrant their vote. They'll tell you that if Kamala tomorrow announced that she was going to, as president, stop all arms sales to Israel on day one, they'll tell you that this would cause them to vote for her. My sense of these people, this particular type of people that Kyle Kulinski and many other creators appeal to, would just move the goalposts further and make it about something else. Well, you haven't forgiven student loan debt in full for every single American with student loan debt, therefore I can't support you. It would be something like that. But this idea that we should just ignore right-wing voters in this country that recognize Trump for the threat that he is, we should just ignore them, is a bit silly to me, especially when you consider the fact that Kamala Harris is not promising these people like massive tax cuts for the rich. She's not promising Liz Cheney a massive deregulatory agenda. She's not promising Liz Cheney to oppose marijuana legalization, for example. Liz Cheney is not backing Kamala Harris because of policy. That has nothing to do with this discussion. Liz Cheney is backing Kamala Harris because she thinks that Donald Trump is insane. And yeah, if Donald Trump was not the candidate this year, if it was someone like Nikki Haley, if it was someone like Tim Scott, Liz Cheney would be backing those candidates. She would not be backing Kamala Harris. So this line of attack where, well, you know, if you got Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney in your corner, maybe that says something about your movement, I think is total nonsense. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I have so many more opinions about this topic. I might be talking about them live on stream right now as you're watching this. My Twitch link is in the description below. It's just twitch.tv/Hutch. We stream on that channel Sundays through Thursdays, usually around noon-ish until about 6-ish, give or take a couple of hours. So swing by, say what's up, join the conversation, and I'll see you guys in the next video.